All right, let's dive into key EI industries. I've been looking over all this stuff you sent, their annual report, those quarterly results, and it seems like you're really interested in getting a handle on this whole Indian cable and wire thing.
Yeah, it's a fascinating company.
Yeah. One thing that really caught my eye, that partnership with the Royal Challengers Bangalore cricket team.
Oh, yeah?
I mean, talk about a power play, right? But before we get into the marketing and all that, let's start with the basics. What does Key EI Industries actually do?
Well, at their core, they manufacture and sell a wide range of cables and wires. Everything from the basic low-tension wires you see in homes, all the way to, like, those super powerful, extra high voltage cables for those big power grids.
Wow, okay.
And they even produce, specialized wires for specific things, like winding wires, stainless steel wires. Their portfolio is pretty diverse.
So they're not just like, your average everyday wire company, right?
No, not at all. They also offer something called EPC solutions, which is really interesting. Essentially, they can act as a one-stop shop for clients who need, entire power infrastructure projects done. It's a pretty smart way to integrate themselves into the value chain.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's not just about making the wires, it's about like, installing them and making sure the whole system works.
Exactly.
And speaking of reach, looking at their stuff, it's clear they're not just focused on the power sector. They're involved in real estate, infrastructure, steel, fertilizer. I mean, the list goes on. Refinery, transportation, even energy sectors. Pretty much everywhere, it seems like.
Yeah, they've got a broad reach. And it's not just India either. They export to, like, over 60 countries.
Oh, wow. Okay, so definitely casting a wide net.
They are. And when you think about the industry they operate in, it's really important to understand that context. India's wires and cables industry is like a major player. It makes up almost 39% of the entire electrical industry.
Well, that's a big chunk.
It is, and it's projected to grow at a rate of about 10% annually. Yeah. And there are a few things driving that. The government's pushing all those initiatives like the Smart Cities Mission, PMAY, Urban, Make in India. All those programs need a ton of wires and cables.
Oh, yeah, of course. Makes sense.
So KEI is riding this wave of growth in a booming sector.
So Key EI's in a good spot. But how do they stand out in such a crowded market? I mean, their annual report says they're a leader, but what gives them that edge?
Well, one big factor is their manufacturing power. They have 6, cutting-edge manufacturing facilities across India. That really allows them to, meet that demand we've been talking about.
Yeah, that they're strategically placed to wire up the whole country.
Pretty much.
And I also noticed they talk about backward integration in their report. Is that part of their secret sauce?
Oh, absolutely. KEI produces, a big portion of their key raw materials in-house.
Wow.
It's smart. First, it reduces their reliance on those outside suppliers, which can be kind of shaky, especially these days. And second, it gives them more control over the quality of their products.
Yeah, that makes sense. So they've got the manufacturing muscle, the quality control. But you got to keep innovating, right? What's Key EI doing to stay ahead of the game in such a fast-paced world?
Well, their commitment to research and development is really impressive.
Okay.
They're constantly developing new products and customized solutions to meet the needs of, their very diverse client base. For example, they've developed this new type of fire-resistant cable that's made specifically for solar installations, which is a big deal for safety in that booming market.
Oh, that's cool. So they're not just keeping up. They're actually anticipating future needs.
Exactly.
I see they're also making a big deal about their retail presence. Are they going beyond those big infrastructure projects and reaching everyday consumers too?
Yeah. Key EI has a strong retail segment and a huge distribution network, which allows them to reach those consumers directly. They're really focusing on building a strong brand, especially with their high-margin house wires and cables.
Okay. I guess that explains that Royal Challengers partnership.
Definitely helps.
So it seems like Key EI is in a pretty good position. But every business has its risks, right? What are some potential challenges they might face?
Well, like any business, they are vulnerable to, supply chain problems, especially in today's world. But they are trying to address that by diversifying their suppliers and being smart about their inventory.
Right. It's all about being adaptable and prepared, huh?
Exactly.
Their annual report also mentions financial and reporting risks. What's that all about?
Basically, things like changes in, foreign exchange rates and commodity prices can have a big impact on their bottom line. Managing credit risk is also important because, well, defaults from clients can mean losses for them. Key EI knows about these risks, and they talk a lot about good corporate governance as a way to mitigate them.
So it's not just about growth, it's about growing responsibly.
Right.
What are they doing specifically on that corporate governance front?
They've got a pretty comprehensive risk management framework in place. They're committed to transparency in their financial reporting and have a clear ESG policy, covering environmental, social, and governance issues. Seems like they understand that good corporate governance builds trust with investors and helps ensure long-term success.
That's good to hear. But even with good governance, you can't control the competition, right? The wires and cables industry is getting more and more organized, so that means more competition for key EI.
Yeah, for sure. Competition is heating up. To stay ahead, they're focusing on those high-margin segments like retail and those specialized extra high-voltage cables.
The ones that can transmit power over, like, super
But
long distances.
yes. Those are essential for connecting things like remote renewable energy projects to the grid, minimizing energy loss. It's a smart move.
Yeah.
They're also kind of strategically scaling back their lower margin EPC business to focus on those more profitable areas.
It's like picking your battles. Smart. And speaking of advantages, where do they stand on sustainability? It's a big deal for a lot of investors these days, right?
Oh, they're taking it seriously. They're working to use resources more efficiently, reduce their carbon footprint, and switch to cleaner energy in their operations.
Okay.
And they're investing in communities, too. They have a cool CSR program, corporate social responsibility. One of their initiatives is actually providing solar-powered lighting to off-grid villages.
Oh, wow. So not just good business, but good for the world, too.
Yeah, it's a great example of how sustainability can be a win-win.
It really seems like they're trying to make it part of their DNA.
Definitely.
And not just the environment, their annual report also highlights employee development, like training and skill-building programs.
They know that a happy and skilled workforce is a huge asset.
So clearly, KEI is thinking about the big picture, not just the bottom line. But let's get back to that growth potential. What does the future hold for them?
Yes. Well, they have some big expansion plans. They're investing heavily in boosting their manufacturing capacity, and they've got that big project going on in Sanand, Gujarat. It's supposed to significantly ramp up production.
That's the one that's slated to be operational by the end of FY25, right?
Yep. That expansion will allow them to meet the growing demand, both in India and globally. But it's not just about building more factories. They're also working on improving their product mix, focusing on those high-margin retail products and the specialized cables for renewable energy.
So aligning their production with the trends and what's most profitable.
Exactly. They're also diversifying their revenue streams by expanding into new markets abroad and being choosy about those EPC projects.
So a multi-pronged approach to growth. Sounds pretty smart.
It's all about making the business more resilient and adaptable to the future.
It all sounds promising. But like you said earlier, there are always risks. What are some of the potential roadblocks they might face as they grow?
Well, competition is definitely a big one. The market's getting more and more organized, so there's going to be more pressure on pricing and market share.
Yeah, that makes sense. How do they plan to, stay ahead of the pack and keep that competitive edge?
Differentiation is key. They really emphasize their quality, innovative products, and their ability to create custom solutions. And they're using their strong brand and that wide distribution network to reach customers and build those long-term relationships.
So it's about playing to their strengths, carving out their own space in the market.
Right.
But even with a good strategy, you can't control everything, right? What about external factors, like changes in government regulations, economic policies? Could that impact their growth?
Definitely. The wires and cables industry is really tied to infrastructure development and those government initiatives. So any big changes there could have a big impact. They've got to stay flexible and adapt to those changes.
Like a game of chess, always thinking a few moves ahead.
Exactly.
And speaking of staying ahead, how's KEI approaching the increasing role of technology in their industry?
They're going all in on technology. They're using all sorts of digital tools and platforms to streamline things, make things more efficient, and create a better customer experience. And they're investing in data analytics to understand, market trends and consumer behavior, essential in today's world.
Right, using tech to their advantage.
Exactly.
So they're not just a traditional manufacturing company anymore. They're like a tech-enabled solutions provider.
Yeah. Which is much more dynamic and future-proof, for sure.
And that brings us back to that Royal Challengers partnership. It's more than just a flashy sponsorship, right?
Definitely. It's a really strategic way to increase their visibility, especially with a younger, more tech-savvy audience, crucial for long-term growth, especially in that retail segment. They're also working with architects and influencers to build brand loyalty.
Sounds like they're really covering all their bases.
They are.
Well, I think we've successfully navigated this first part of our deep dive into key EI industries.
I think so.
We've got a good look at their business model, their advantages, and their place in this really interesting sector.
It is a fascinating industry for sure.
But we're just getting started. In the next part, we're going to dig into those numbers, analyze their growth trajectory, and really assess their overall prospects.
Sounds good.
All right, so we're back. We spent the first part of our deep dive into key EI industries, getting a feel for their overall business, how they operate, what makes them tick. But now it's time to roll up our sleeves and dig into the numbers. You sent over those quarterly results, their FY24 annual report, so we've got plenty to unpack.
Yeah, let's get into the financials.
Okay, so a good place to start, I think, is with their latest quarterly results. What do we see there?
Well, their Q1 FY25 results showed a profit after tax, PAT, of 150.25 crore rupees.
Okay, so that's their profit after all the expenses and everything?
Exactly.
Seems like a decent number, but is it good compared to, how they did before?
It's actually a pretty significant jump from the 121.38 crore rupees they reported for the same quarter the previous year.
Oh, wow.
And their PAT to net sales ratio, that also improved to 7.29%. Up from 6.82% the year before.
Okay, I'm not a finance whiz, so break that down for me. What does that ratio actually tell us?
Sure. Basically, it shows how much profit they're making for every rupee of sales. So that increase means they're becoming more profitable and efficient.
So they're not just growing revenue, they're making more out of each sale.
Right.
That's a good sign. What about their Q2 FY25 results? Are they keeping up that momentum?
Yeah, their Q2 results also show continued growth, with their net segment results going over 878 crore rupees.
Wow, that's a big jump.
It is. It's a big increase compared to last year, and it really reflects the strong demand they're seeing across their different business segments. Like those high-margin house wires and cables we talked about earlier.
Okay, so it sounds like things are going really well.
Mm-hmm.
But quarterly figures, they only give us a snapshot, right?
Mm-hmm.
To really understand how healthy they are financially, we need to look at the bigger picture.
Definitely. And that's where their FY24 annual report comes in. It gives us a much more complete picture of their performance for the entire fiscal year.
All right, so what does that annual report tell us? What kind of revenue numbers are we talking about here?
Well, they hit a net sales figure of over 8,100 crore rupees. That's a solid 17.31% growth from the previous year.
Wow, that's impressive. And their earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, EBITDA, is that right?
You got it.
Did that also see a good increase?
Yeah, their EBITDA reached 887 crore rupees, which is a growth of 20.81%.
Okay, and EBITDA, just to remind me, that's a measure of their operating profitability, right?
Exactly, and that big jump really underlines their strong financial performance.
Okay, so far so good. What about their profit after tax for the whole year? The bottom line,
Well, they reported a strong 581 crore rupees in profit after tax. That's a 21.72% increase from the year before.
Whoa. So they're not just growing, they're converting that growth into profit, which is awesome.
Right. Their strategies seem to be working.
I'm curious about how the different parts of their business are doing. We talked about retail, institutional, international. Are they all contributing to this success?
Yeah, for sure. Let's start with retail, which is still a major driver of their profitability. Their focus on building those dealer networks and their marketing seems to be paying off.
Yeah, we talked about how those house wires and cables are especially profitable. Is that because they're just flying off the shelves?
Exactly. They're seeing faster product offtake, which is fantastic for their cash flow. It means they don't have to have as much money tied up in inventory, and it contributes to those good return ratios.
So happy customers, smooth operations, and healthy profits. A win-win-win.
Exactly.
What about their institutional business? How's that side of things doing?
That's doing well, too. Serving all sorts of industries, oil and gas, railways, those renewable energy projects. It really shows their expertise and their ability to manage those big projects that need those specialized, high-quality cables.
Right, and with India's infrastructure growing so quickly, there's probably a lot of potential there.
There is a lot of room for growth.
It's like they've got a front row seat to India's growth story, huh?
Yeah, they do.
And what about their international expansion? Are they making headway in those overseas markets?
They are. They're being smart about it, targeting specific areas, building partnerships, and their Made in India label is becoming more and more recognized globally for its quality and value.
It's a tough market out there, so that's really impressive.
Yeah, it is.
So they're laying the groundwork for long-term success abroad.
Definitely.
Okay, let's zoom back in on their overall growth. They've already seen some pretty amazing growth, but what's next? Where do they go from here?
Well, they've got some pretty ambitious plans for expansion laid out in their annual report. They're investing a lot in boosting their manufacturing capacity, including that new facility in Sanand, Gujarat.
Right, the one that's supposed to be up and running by the end of FY25.
That's the one. That's going to seriously boost their output.
That'll help them keep up with all that demand, right?
Exactly, both in India and abroad. But it's not just about, building more factories. They're also focusing on fine-tuning their product mix,
Ah, okay.
increasing the proportion of those high-margin retail products and the specialized cables for the renewable energy sector.
So aligning themselves with those market trends and focusing on what's most profitable.
Exactly. And they're diversifying their revenue by entering those new markets overseas and choosing EPC projects carefully. It's a multifaceted approach to growth, all aimed at creating a really solid business model.
Makes them more adaptable and resilient.
Exactly.
But even with the best plans, there are always challenges, right? What are some things that might slow them down?
Well, competition's a big one. As the market gets more organized, new players come in, there's going to be more pressure on pricing and, who gets what share of the market.
Right, we talked about that before. What's their plan for staying ahead of the competition?
It all comes down to, setting themselves apart. They're highlighting their quality, those innovative products, their ability to tailor solutions to specific needs, and they're using their brand recognition and their extensive distribution network to reach more customers and build those strong relationships.
So playing to their strengths, carving out their niche.
Exactly.
But even with a solid strategy, they can't control everything, right? What about those external factors? Things like changes in government regulations, economic policies. Could that throw a wrench in their plans?
Oh, absolutely. The wires and cables industry is pretty closely linked to infrastructure development and government initiatives. So any big shifts there could definitely impact their business. They need to be ready to adapt and adjust their strategy as things change.
Always staying agile and aware.
That's the key.
And speaking of staying ahead, how are they handling the increasing importance of technology in their industry? Their annual report talked about their digital transformation.
Oh, they're embracing technology in a big way. They're using all sorts of digital tools and platforms to streamline their operations, make things more efficient, and improve the customer experience. And they're using data analytics to better understand market trends and how consumers behave.
Smart move.
Right.
Using technology to improve both their internal processes and their relationships with customers.
Exactly.
So they're not just a traditional manufacturer anymore. They're like a tech-enabled solutions provider, which is a much more dynamic and future-proof position to be in.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground with KEI Industries, their financials, their growth strategy. But now I want to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Where do they fit in this whole world of wires and cables? What are the big trends shaping the industry as a whole?
Well, one of the biggest trends is this shift, from those unorganized players to the more organized ones. Consumers are getting smarter, they want quality, they care about brand reputation. It's not just about the cheapest price anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense. People want to know those wires in their homes or businesses are, safe, reliable, especially with all the gadgets and electronics we use these days.
Exactly. And that's good news for companies like KEI. They're already benefiting from this shift. They have a decent market share because they focus on quality, they've built a good brand.
But more organized players means, more competition, right? How are they dealing with that?
They're being strategic. Remember those high-margin segments we talked about, like retail and those specialized cables for renewable energy?
Yeah.
That's where they're focusing. Those are areas where they have a real advantage, where they can charge a premium.
So finding their niche, becoming the go-to for those specific products and services.
Exactly.
And what about renewable energy itself? How's that impacting the whole wires and cables industry?
It's huge. As India's investing more in renewable energy, the need for specialized cables and transmission infrastructure is just going to explode. Think massive solar farms, wind turbines, all the connections needed to get that energy to people's homes and businesses.
And KEI is ready to jump on that, right?
Oh, absolutely. They're experts in high-voltage cables, the ones that can send power over long distances without losing much energy. And they've got those EPC capabilities, so they're in a perfect position.
It's cool to think they're not just making cables, they're wiring up the future of energy.
They are.
And it's not just about the environment, right? They're also helping India transition to a more sustainable energy mix, which is a big deal.
For sure. And then you've got technology, another major force in the industry. The rise of smart cities, technology becoming a bigger part of our lives that's changing everything.
Yeah, the Internet of Things, smart grids, all that.
Exactly. All that requires much more sophisticated cables, integrated solutions, things that KEI is already good at. They're not just connecting things, they're building a smarter, more connected world.
It's amazing how they've changed, from the traditional manufacturer to a company at the forefront of all this cool tech. But with all this change and disruption, how do they stack up against the competition? Are they still a leader in this evolving industry?
I think they are. They've got strong financials, a diverse range of products, a good brand, and those strategically located factories that's a really solid base.
Yeah.
And they can ramp up production to meet that growing demand, and they're not afraid to, adapt and innovate.
But they're not the only ones, right? What sets them apart? What are their, key advantages?
A few things. First, that backward integration, remember. That gives them more control over their costs and the quality of their products, which is huge in a competitive market. Then, their focus on R&D, they're always coming up with new stuff, like those fire-resistant cables for solar. And they're really putting effort into building their brand, connecting with consumers, like that partnership with the Royal Challengers Bangalore.
Right, that's more than just marketing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about building trust, showing people you're a brand they can rely on. So looking ahead, what's the outlook for KEI? Do they have what it takes to thrive in this industry?
I think they do. The wires and cable sector's got a bright future, with all those big trends we've talked about. Infrastructure, renewable energy, smart cities. KEI is in a great spot. They're financially solid, they're smart about their strategy, and they're committed to innovation and sustainability.
And that sustainability piece, that's not just a nice to have anymore, is it? It's becoming a bigger deal for investors and customers.
For sure. Investors are looking for companies that are doing well, but also doing good. And more people are choosing brands based on their values, their environmental impact.
So KEI is not just wiring up India, they're helping build a better future.
Exactly.
Well, it's been fascinating diving deep into KEI Industries.
It has.
We've explored their business, analyzed their numbers, talked about the future of the industry, even peeked into their marketing strategy. We've really gotten a good sense of this company.
Yeah, we have. It's a great example of how a traditional company can adapt and change, embrace those new ideas, stay ahead of the curve. It's inspiring, really.
It is. KEI Industries, definitely a company to watch. And for everyone listening, stay curious.